Violin has been my entire life. It's more than just an instrument, it's more than just sound. It's a representation of kind of the whole personality of how I was brought up. Well, so, I would love to see your violin, first of all. It's a beautiful case. It looks like something from a different era.
Yeah, and...
Is that leather?
Well, no, it's not leather, but the case is leather.
Okay.
And you can see how patina it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is a violin that in 1963, my father built this violin.
1963.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he based it on the Stradivarius Messiah.
Yep.
And you can see the broad shoulder.
Yeah.
And the thickness of the shape here is not like a Guarnerius.
Nope.
The Guarnerius has a much more accentuated top.
And it's slimmer as well.
That's right.
Yeah. Just take a look at this. Wow. Yeah, it's very well set up, so. Sounds like a viola right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's fantastic to see this. And your father made this.
If you look inside the F-hole, you'll see the label.
Made especially for Paul Barton by his father in Kitchener, 1963. Wow. That is special. I wish my dad made me a violin. Well, he actually did. My dad, so I started out when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
But even before that, I was very interested in playing the violin. My brother's a violinist himself also.
Okay.
And he's 5 years older than I am. And just since my brother was playing, that I remember being, you know, my youngest memory, I was 1 or 2, and I just kept taking a pair of chopsticks and imitating him no matter what.
Right.
So my dad just saw that this little kid, this little baby is so excited about playing the violin, he made me a cardboard box violin. Oh. And wow. I destroyed it on a consistent basis, but...
Like a cigar box.
Like a cigar box, exactly, yeah. He just took, you know, leftover cardboard and shaped it into a violin, and I used a chopstick to be the bow, and so not as romantic as yours, but much more practical in some ways.
Yeah.
Violin has been my entire life.
Yeah.
So I was born in Victoria, BC, and I remember that when we were growing up, we would always go down to Seattle to go to the Seattle Suzuki Festival. And my brother was participating in that, and I would also participate in that program.
Did you train based on the Suzuki
style?
I did.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I have my own system now, but so I started with Suzuki because it was just an opportunity to start playing.
Yeah.
It was more than any technique. There was no real formal, I think, pedagogical lineage out in Seattle at the time. And then I started taking private lessons when I was 3.
Okay.
Until I was about, I still take private lessons to these days, but I went to an institution when I was about 5, and I started going to the Victoria Conservatory of Music. Then I went to the Mount Royal Conservatory in Calgary at the time, when it was still a college, not a university yet. I would fly in from Victoria to Calgary every other weekend for lessons. And then when I was in my teenage years, my brother entered the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And I wanted to do that too. So I auditioned when I was 15 and I got in. And then since then, my whole life has been in music and never stopped. I started competing. I started performing professionally as well. And it's sometimes hard to even stop because I realize it's just been nonstop since I was 15 until now. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, just the violin for me is more than just an instrument. It's more than just sound. It's, it's a representation of kind of the whole personality of how I was brought up, what's important to me in my value system, the importance of sharing, and kind of my principles. So I know that the violin seems like a piece of wood and just sound that comes out of a piece of wood, but I think it can mean so much more. And I think that absolutely, it's so interesting to know more about the speakers as well, because that is recreating the sounds that's available.
Well, being true to the sound of the actual source.
Absolutely.
And that's what a speaker should be doing.
All right, let's go play some violin.
You've produced some sound Now we're going to do some reproduction of sound and hopefully be able to capture the same kind of emotions and music that people get when they hear the live performance. So that's the challenge. And this is our flagship, which is called the T800, Synchrony T800. And you may or may not know, but each of the woofers, there are 3 of them, are in their own enclosure. Each of these woofers doesn't cover the same range of frequencies. They all cover the lowest frequency together. And the reason we have to do that is in sound, it's hard for one driver to produce the whole range of frequencies. You'll get the blend of those as though it were one source. That's the whole objective of the way we've configured this speaker. Now, I guess the best thing is to maybe give them a listen.
Amazing. I really felt like I was encased in a whole world of different textures and airflow. My ears are overwhelmed with the amount of flavors it's having right now.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. The speaker is only a window through which you see the acoustical event.
And I am experiencing that real time.
Yeah, good.
I mean, to hear it from this angle and these speakers, I almost felt like, I wouldn't feel like I was quite in the audience, but it felt like I was almost to the side and very close to the performer. Because I could hear the articulation of almost some of the chips of the wood in the hair.
But that kind of detail is like being in the front row.
I think so, yeah. I really, actually, you know what? That's an interesting idea. I felt like I was the microphone.
Exactly.
I was the microphone, yeah. And that's
like a lot of speakers wouldn't pick that up.
No, and I get to hear it because I understand now the quality of timbre. Before, when I was listening to earphones, it just sounded more like a pitch rather than actual timbre.
Yeah, with texture.
I mean, now what I've noticed with these speakers is I'm noticing the placement of the mics much more clearly. And it's more obvious than if I were to listen to any other types of speakers. That doesn't have this amount of technology and thought put into one. So really interesting to see that listening from this perspective and where I am and with these particular products that I can hear that the way the engineers have put the mics play a bigger role in my experience than if I were to listen to it, with some cheap headphones or something.
Right.
I mean, of course, maybe that's very obvious for someone like you, but for me, with someone who's very naive with these new speaker worlds, it's fascinating.
As you may or may not realize, particularly if you don't have a really high-end reproduction system, the variability of recordings is much greater today in many cases than the variability of different brands of loudspeakers.
Yes. Because
speakers have progressively gotten better over the years. Music recording, to be honest with you, is not as mature as the reproduction. The production side of things is getting better, but still is a bit of a loose cannon. It's important for me when I'm doing demonstrations to try and select recordings that are well done, that represent the results that I expect or something close to the original performance.
And especially so because when we're recording with orchestra and with a single violin, we do on our side as musicians take an effort to record in a hall. Oftentimes, other organizations or
studio, artificial reverb and things like that.
Exactly, and for us, we take the investment of renting out, the nice hall. When it comes to labels and doing a professional recording, I think as an artist, especially as the person being featured, we have to look out there what kind of recordings we like, understand who the producer is and the recording engineer. But generally, it's just like anything. It's the right partner, the right collaborator, and the right hall.
You've done recordings in studios before?
Yes.
So when you must hear good sound reproduction in the sound rooms there.
Yeah.
And that kind of detail should come out in that environment as well.
Yes. So how it works for me when I'm doing my recordings I do listen to the recordings, but there's almost a little bit of this a little bit of a quote or saying that the performer should not listen too much because then it goes endless with the recording process.
Yes,
so we have a producer that we have to trust, and that's where the relationship between the performer, the artist, and the producer have to be a really special one. And finding the right partner is very difficult. But once that is done, I believe then you got to trust the ears of the producer. And the thing about acoustical instruments, and especially for me when it's not electronic, what's difficult is to recreate that 3 dimension of sound that often gets very flat. Exactly, yeah. Which for me is fascinating because oftentimes as a naive performer, we expect the exact same of detail that we listen on stage to automatically come out like this, when it takes it's an art form itself
to do that.
To do all of this, and there is no formula. There is
the radiation pattern of a violin is very complex. So to put one microphone close to it and expect to hear what you're hearing because of all the reflections that occur in the room,
overtones,
off the floor, reflections off of you. One microphone can't capture that to the same degree that our ears can in a room.